They won't let me eat. That's what the little girl whispered, soft, scared, and honest. And in that small-town diner, every sound just stopped. It was late afternoon, sunlight sliding through dusty windows at Mabel's Diner, a place that smelled like coffee, fried onions, and old stories. People sat in their usual booths, truckers, farmers, a few tired faces. Nothing unusual until that voice. Outside, 6 motorcycles had just parked in a row, engines cooling. The men who rode them, the Hells Angels, had stopped for burgers, not trouble. But what they walked into was something else. In the corner sat a little girl in a wheelchair, her legs wrapped in a soft blanket, her hair tied with a blue ribbon. Her plate sat untouched, pancakes getting cold. Beside her, her mother looked worn out, holding a faded purse. Across the counter stood a man in a suit, shiny shoes, smug smile. "Ma'am," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "if you can't pay, you can't eat. We don't run a charity." The mother's voice cracked. "Please, sir, my card didn't go through. I'll bring the money tomorrow." He smiled, arms crossed. "Tomorrow doesn't keep the lights on. Please leave before you cause a scene." The little girl's voice shook. "They won't let me eat, Mommy." And that's when the door opened. The bikers stepped in. The leader, a tall man with gray in his beard and a look that could quiet a room, froze mid-step. His eyes went straight to the child. The air thickened. Even the jukebox went quiet. He walked closer, slow and steady. "What did you just say, sweetheart?" Her mother tried to stop him. "Please, sir, it's fine, we'll go." But he shook his head gently. "No one leaves hungry. Not tonight." The man in the suit laughed nervously. "Look, buddy, it's not your business. She couldn't pay. Rules are rules." The leader tilted his head. "You proud of that rule?" The man blinked. "Excuse me?" He stepped closer, voice calm but sharp. "You proud of turning away a hungry kid?" The man's jaw tightened. "It's business." The biker's eyes softened toward the girl. "You hungry, kid?" She nodded. "Yes, sir." He pulled out his wallet and dropped 2 crisp hundreds on the counter. "Her meal's paid. Bring her anything she wants." The waitress, a young woman with shaky hands, looked relieved. She nodded and hurried to the kitchen. The man in the suit said, "I don't take orders from bikers." The leader leaned in slightly. "Then think of this as advice." That was all it took. The man stepped back, pale. The waitress returned with a fresh plate, a mountain of pancakes, butter melting down the sides, strawberries shaped like hearts. She set it down gently. The little girl stared at it like it was magic. "Thank you," she whispered. The leader smiled softly. "Eat, sweetheart." Her mom covered her face, tears slipping between her fingers. "You didn't have to," he interrupted kindly. "Yeah, I did." The girl took a bite. Her whole face changed from fear to joy. The room warmed up again. Conversations slowly returned. Even strangers smiled. One of the bikers, a big man called Tank, leaned to his friend. "Ain't that something?" "All this over pancakes," the leader said quietly. "It's never just about pancakes." The mother's voice broke again. "We've been at the hospital for weeks. She asked for this one thing. I didn't realize my card would fail." He nodded. "Ma'am, no one should ever have to beg for food. Not here." The waitress overheard. Anne whispered. I tried to cover it. "The boss wouldn't let me." The leader glanced toward the man in the suit. "He your boss?" "Yes, sir." "Well," he said, "he just made a mistake. He won't forget." The girl kept eating, quiet and happy. Her mom wiped her tears, whispering, "You see, honey, there are still good people." The girl nodded. "They look scary, but they're nice." The bikers laughed softly. The leader turned to leave but stopped by the counter. "You ever been hungry?" he asked the owner. The man froze. "What? Hungry?" the leader repeated. "Not skipped lunch hungry. Real hungry. The kind that hurts." The man looked away. "Didn't think so." The biker said, then walked out. Outside, the air was cooler now. The sun was setting over the highway, painting everything orange. The leader stood beside his bike, silent. The others waited. Tank asked, "You okay, boss?" He nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" He stared back at the diner window. Inside, the little girl was laughing now, syrup on her cheeks. Her mom was smiling for the first time all day. He said quietly, "Some people think power comes from money, but real power is giving someone back their dignity. Tank folded his arms. You planning something? The leader looked down the road, engines reflecting the sunset. Yeah, he said after a pause. Tomorrow. The men nodded. No more words needed. They started their engines, the deep roar filling the quiet town, echoing off old brick walls and gas station signs. People looked through curtains, wondering what had just happened. Inside the diner, the waitress watched from the window as the bikers rolled away. She turned to the mom. You all right now? The woman nodded slowly. I think so. I've never seen anyone stand up for us before. The waitress smiled. You deserved it. The girl giggled. They look like superheroes. Her mom squeezed her hand. Maybe they are. The waitress went back to the counter, staring at the cash the biker had left. Enough to pay for the meal and then some. Her throat tightened. Behind her, the man in the suit slammed his office door, but no one cared anymore. The waitress wiped the counter, humming softly. That night, long after they left, the diner stayed quiet. The lights flickered against the dark highway, the smell of syrup still in the air. The girl and her mom drove off toward the next town, tired but lighter. And out on the open road, the bikers rode beneath a purple sky, engines humming steady. The leader didn't speak. He just let the wind carry the memory. A child's trembling words that wouldn't leave his mind. They won't let me eat. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a reminder, one that stayed in Red's mind long after the engines faded into the dark. The road stretched empty under the night sky. The wind was cool, the world quiet, but inside Red's chest something burned. That little girl's voice, soft, embarrassed, broken, echoed louder than any Harley he'd ever ridden. They stopped at an old gas station on the edge of town, the kind that smelled like oil and rain. The neon sign buzzed weakly. The bikes cooled in a line, ticking in rhythm. Tank lit a cigarette, watching his leader stare into the dark. You still thinking about her, huh? Red nodded slowly. Can't shake it. Tank exhaled smoke into the wind. You paid for her food. You did what anyone decent would do. Red looked down. That's the problem. Too many people ain't decent anymore. The others went quiet. They'd seen Red like this before. Calm, quiet, but never still inside. Bobby, the youngest, asked, You think that guy, the one in the suit, even cares? Red gave a dry laugh. Men like him never care. They've never been hungry a day in their lives. Just then, the gas station door creaked. Earl, the old owner, came out holding a pot of coffee. Evening, boys. You look like you've seen a ghost. Red accepted a cup. Something like that. Earl leaned against the post. What happened? Red's voice stayed low. We stopped at Mabel's diner. A little girl in a wheelchair was told to leave because her mom's card didn't work. The owner made a show out of it, laughed at them. Earl's expression hardened. That place still open? Thought the bank was taking it. Not yet, Red said, but maybe it should have been. They stood in silence for a while, the hum of the highway faint in the distance. Finally, Red spoke. You know what hit me the hardest? Nobody in that diner said a word. Not one person stood up. Earl sighed. That's how it is now. People don't want to get involved. Easier to pretend they don't see it. Red's eyes narrowed. Yeah, well, maybe it's time somebody reminds them that kindness ain't optional. Tank raised an eyebrow. You're not thinking about letting it go, are you? Red half smiled. You know me better than that. Bobby groaned. Man, last time you said that, we rebuilt a whole park and it still stands, Red said. This will stand too. He stood up, putting on his gloves. We ride back? At sunrise, Tank asked. What for? Red looked at the horizon. To fix what money broke. The sun rose over the fields, painting the sky in gold and orange. When they pulled into town, the air felt different, like the day itself was holding its breath. Mabel's diner looked exactly the same. Peeling paint, flickering sign, and the same man in the suit behind the counter counting cash. Red parked across the street, watching. The others waited for his word. He finally said, Let's go remind them what respect looks like. The little bell jingled as they entered. The waitress, the same one from the night before, froze when she saw them. Then she smiled nervously. "You came back?" Red nodded. "We're here for breakfast." The owner stepped forward. "If you're here to make trouble—" "No trouble," Red said calmly. He set a thick envelope on the counter. "That's for breakfast, for everyone in this room." The owner blinked. "Everyone?" "Everyone," Red repeated. The waitress looked stunned. "All of them?" "Everyone," Red said. "No checks today." The chatter in the room stopped. Then one man at a booth chuckled. "Well, I ain't arguing with that." The waitress turned to the kitchen. "Charlie, pancakes for everybody." And just like that, the place came alive. The smell of syrup and butter filled the air. Laughter started. Soft at first, then stronger. Tank winked at a kid sitting with his dad. "You ever seen this many pancakes before, buddy?" The boy shook his head, smiling. The waitress ran plates back and forth, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. It felt like a different place entirely, lighter, warmer, human again. But Red kept watching the owner. The man was sweating now, hands trembling as he rang up nothing. Red leaned closer to him. "You see that? That's what a diner's supposed to look like. Not fear, family." The man swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Red said softly. "Just for you to remember how it feels to feed people instead of turning them away." He left the envelope on the counter, enough cash to cover every meal and then some. When it was over, the waitress stared at the bill, stunned. "Sir, this is more than the diner makes in a week." Red smiled faintly. "Then maybe you'll treat the next person better than he did." She looked toward the booth where Lily had sat the day before. "That little girl, she changed something. Didn't she?" "She did," Red said. "She reminded us what's worth fighting for." The men stood, ready to leave. Red looked one last time at the old sign above the door. The open sign flickered like it was trying to say something. He smiled to himself. "Guess it's finally telling the truth." Tank followed him outside. "So that's it?" "Not quite," Red said. "We're not done yet." They rode out again, sunlight flashing across the chrome, the sound of their engines echoing down the sleepy streets. By nightfall, the story had already spread. Someone posted a picture. Dozens of motorcycles lined up outside the diner, captioned, "They came back and they fed everyone." Within hours, it hit every local feed. People stopped calling them troublemakers. Now they were heroes. But Red didn't care about fame. He just wanted that man in the suit and maybe the whole town to remember one simple truth that should have never been forgotten. No one deserves to hear those words again. "They won't let me eat." That thought stayed in Red's mind long after the sound of the engines faded. It was more than a moment. It was a memory that had come back to life. A memory he'd spent years trying to bury. He couldn't stop thinking about that little girl's face, how she looked down, afraid to even ask for food. That kind of shame wasn't born in a day. Someone had taught her to feel small. Someone had shown her that money decides who matters. And Red hated that, because he remembered being that kid. The road stretched wide and empty as they headed out of town, but his mind went back years to a dirt trailer park outside Tulsa, where a hungry boy once sat on the steps with an empty plate, watching his mom cry because she couldn't buy groceries. He could still see her wiping her tears with the back of her hand, pretending everything was fine. That boy had promised himself something that day. No one around him would ever go hungry again if he could help it. Now, decades later, that promise was still riding shotgun. The next morning, Red parked his bike behind the diner again, this time not for anger, but for understanding. He needed to know what really happened. He found the waitress outside, leaning against the brick wall, smoking before her shift. She froze when she saw him, but then gave a nervous smile. "You're back again?" He nodded. "Didn't come for breakfast. Just wanted to talk." She shrugged, breathing out smoke. "I figured you might. I didn't sleep much last night." "Neither did I," he said quietly. "Tell me something, sweetheart. That little girl yesterday, what's her story?" The waitress flicked her ash, her eyes softening. "Her name's Lily. Her mom brings her in every few months after her doctor visits. Always orders the same thing. Pancakes. Never causes trouble." "She didn't look like the kind of person that skips out on a bill," Red said. "They're not," the waitress replied. "Her mom works at the nursing home down on Main. Single mom. Her husband left when the girl got sick, said he couldn't handle it. Red looked away, jaw tight. Coward. The waitress nodded. She's been trying to keep things together ever since, but with the medical bills. She trailed off. You can tell she's drowning. Red leaned against the wall beside her. That man yesterday, the one in the suit, he really told her to leave. Yeah, she said quietly. He's the owner's son. Thinks he's better than everybody. His dad built this diner 50 years ago, but when he passed, the son took over. He raised prices, cut corners, and stopped giving meals to regulars who were short. He calls it business. Red smiled bitterly. I call it greed. The waitress nodded. You're not the first person to say that. For a while they stood in silence, the sound of morning traffic passing by. Then she asked softly, Why'd you come back? Most people would have just driven away. He looked at her, the lines around his eyes deepening. Because I know how it feels to be told you're not worth a meal. The waitress didn't say anything, but the way she looked at him said enough. She understood. Does Lily know? She asked. Know what? That you came back for her. He smiled sadly. She doesn't need to. It's not about me. It's about what kind of town she grows up in. Later that afternoon, Red rode across town to the small clinic where Lily had her checkups. He parked out front, took off his helmet, and waited. After a while, he saw her mother pushing her out the front doors. Same wheelchair, same blue ribbon, same quiet spirit. Red didn't want to scare them, so he waited until they got closer before speaking. Ma'am, he said softly. She looked up, startled. Then she recognized him. You're the man from the diner? Yes, ma'am, he said with a small nod. Didn't mean to bother you. Just wanted to see how your little one's doing. Lily smiled shyly. Hi, Mr. Biker. Hey there, sweetheart. Feeling better today? She nodded proudly. Mom said we get to go home early this time. That's good news, Red said, smiling. Her mom paused before speaking. I never thanked you properly for yesterday. You didn't have to do that. Red shook his head. No, ma'am. I did. You didn't deserve what happened. She sighed, her voice breaking. I just wanted her to have pancakes before we drove home. She doesn't get many treats. I could tell, Red said quietly. She reminded me of someone I used to know. The woman studied him for a moment. You've got kids? No, he said. Didn't have the chance. Life took me another way. She smiled gently. Still, you've got the heart of a father. That caught him off guard. He looked down, suddenly unsure what to say. Before he could respond, Lily reached into her lap and pulled out a crumpled napkin. On it was a drawing done in purple crayon. A little diner, 6 motorcycles outside, and a stick figure girl with pancakes in front of her. At the top, she'd written, Thank you for letting me eat. Red's throat tightened. He knelt down beside her chair and smiled. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Can I keep it? She nodded. You have to. You saved me. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. She's been drawing that since last night. Red took the napkin like it was made of glass. I didn't save you, he said softly. You reminded me why I ride. The woman smiled through tears. You're a good man. Red shook his head slowly. Just a man who remembers what hunger feels like. When they drove off, Red stayed there for a long time, holding that little drawing in his hand. The colors were uneven, the letters crooked, but to him, it looked perfect. He folded it carefully, slid it into his jacket pocket, and looked toward the horizon. Tank's bike pulled up beside him. You all right, boss? Red nodded. Yeah, I just needed to see her. You thinking about calling it done now? Red smiled faintly. Not yet. I think we've got one more thing to finish. Tank grinned. You always do. They rode back toward town, the sun starting to drop behind the trees. Red didn't say much. He just kept one hand over his jacket pocket, where the drawing was. He could almost feel the warmth of it through the leather. By the time they reached the diner again, the lights were just coming on. The waitress was closing up. She saw them through the window and came to the door smiling. Back again, she said, laughing. Red held up the folded napkin. She drew this. Thought you'd want to see it. The waitress unfolded it carefully and gasped. Oh my God, she drew you guys. Yeah, Red said softly. Guess she was paying attention. The waitress looked at the picture again, tears in her eyes. You know what? I think this belongs on that wall. She walked over and pinned it near the register. right beside the old black and white photos of the diner's early days. "There," she said proudly. "Now everyone who walks in will see it." Red stared at the little piece of paper taped to the wall, bright, childlike, full of heart, and for the first time in a long time, something inside him felt lighter. "That's a good start," he said quietly. The waitress smiled. "Start of what?" Red slipped his helmet back on, still watching the drawing. Change. He walked out, the bell ringing behind him. The town was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel empty. The night air carried something new, a kind of peace that comes when someone finally stands up for what's right. As Red climbed onto his bike, he thought of Lily, her smile, her courage, her simple words that had shaken a whole town awake. "They won't let me eat. Not anymore. Not while men like him still rode." He started the engine, and the road answered back, steady, alive, endless. Red rode through the quiet streets of town as the last light of evening faded behind him. The hum of the motorcycle was low and deep, almost like a heartbeat. He didn't have a place to go. Not yet. He just needed to think. The truth was, Lily's drawing had done something to him. It wasn't just a thank you. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest voice could move the biggest hearts. By the time he reached the edge of town, the sky had gone dark and the neon signs along the highway flickered to life. He turned into the gravel lot behind their clubhouse, an old warehouse with a red door, a pool table, and the smell of motor oil and coffee. Inside, a few of the guys were already there. Tank was leaning against the counter, polishing his bike helmet. Bobby was fixing the jukebox that hadn't worked right in years. Red parked, took off his jacket, and sat down at the long wooden table. Nobody said a word. They could tell something heavy was on his mind. Tank finally broke the silence. "All right, boss, what's the plan?" Red looked up, his eyes steady. "We're not finished." Bobby frowned. "You mean the diner?" "Yeah," Red said. "That place still smells like shame. And that man, the one in the suit, he's still there, probably telling himself we're gone for good." Tank crossed his arms. "You want to go back and teach him a lesson?" Red shook his head. "Not that kind of lesson." The room went quiet again. He pulled Lily's drawing from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. The paper was wrinkled from the wind, but the purple crayon still shone bright under the light bulb. "She drew this for us," he said softly. "You know what that means? It means she believed in us. And I don't think we're done earning that." Bobby leaned forward. "So, what do you have in mind?" Red leaned back, his voice calm but firm. "Tomorrow morning, we're buying that diner." For a second, no one spoke. Then Tank blinked. "You're what?" "You heard me," Red said. "We're buying the place." Bobby laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Red, you serious? That dump?" "Yeah," Red said. "That dump. Because it's not about the building. It's about what it could be." Tank rubbed his beard. "And what exactly would we do with a diner?" Red smiled faintly. "Feed people the way it's supposed to be done." The room filled with whispers. Surprise, doubt, curiosity. Earl, the old mechanic who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "You're talking about turning a Hell's Angels clubhouse into a soup kitchen." "Not a soup kitchen," Red corrected him. "A place where nobody's turned away. A place where kindness is served with the coffee." Bobby looked around at the others. "You really think people would come?" "They already do," Red said. "They just don't have anywhere left to go without feeling small." Tank whistled low. "You're serious?" Red nodded. "Dead serious." They spent the next hour making a rough plan. It wasn't about money. They all had some saved up from side jobs and bike repairs. It was about meaning. Red drew a quick sketch on the back of a napkin. Tables, a ramp out front, and a new sign. Bobby pointed to it. "You really think the owner will sell?" Red smiled. "Everyone sells when the right people ask the right way." Tank laughed. "You mean when 100 bikers show up and knock politely?" "Something like that," Red said. "But no threats, no noise. We show up in daylight. We make an offer. We do it clean." Earl leaned forward, his voice low. "You know what this is going to do, right? It's going to flip this whole town upside down." Red nodded. "Good. It's about time." By midnight, most of the men had gone home, but Red stayed behind, sitting alone at the table. He turned Lily's drawing over in his hands again and again. He thought about her mother. The tiredness in her voice, the pride that kept her from begging, the way she whispered, "Thank you," like it hurt to say it. He thought about how many others like her there must be. Good people getting embarrassed for being poor. He'd seen that his whole life. Waitresses shorted on tips, veterans eating from vending machines, kids counting coins for breakfast. He'd spent years thinking the world couldn't change, but maybe it could. Not all at once, not everywhere, but right here in this town. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was right. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the flickering light above. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "We fix it tomorrow." Morning came clear and bright. The engines started early, not the usual half dozen, but dozens more. Word had spread through the network overnight. Bikers from 3 towns away rolled in, one after another, engines roaring like thunder. When Red walked out of the warehouse, the sight stopped him cold. The lot was packed. Bikes lined up in rows, chrome shining in the sunlight. At least 50 men and women stood waiting. Tank grinned. "You said we'd make an offer. Looks like we brought the bank." Red smiled. "Let's make it count." They rode together down Main Street. People came out of stores, covering their eyes, watching. Some smiled, some just stared. Nobody knew what to expect. When the roar finally stopped in front of Mabel's diner, the silence that followed was louder than the engines themselves. Red stepped off his bike and took a long look at the building. Chipped paint, cracked windows, the smell of old grease. He didn't see a diner. He saw a chance. The waitress stood at the window, her mouth open. The man in the suit came running out, panic written all over him. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. Red walked up calmly. "Good morning. We're here to make you an offer." The man blinked. "An offer for what?" "The diner," Red said. "We're buying it." The man laughed like he'd heard the best joke in years. "You can't buy this place. It's not for sale." Red smiled faintly. "Everything's for sale. Depends on the price." He handed him a folded check. The man opened it, and his smile disappeared. His face went pale. "That's 3 months' profit," Red said. "You take it. We take the diner. You walk away clean. Simple." The man paused, looking around. A crowd had started to form. Townspeople, regulars, even a few cops keeping their distance. Nobody spoke. Finally, the man swallowed hard. "Fine," he said. "It's yours." The crowd gasped. Red nodded once. "Good decision." The waitress clapped a hand over her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "You really did it." "Not yet," Red said. "Now we rebuild." He turned to his crew. "Let's clean it up. New paint, new name, new start." Tank grinned. "What should we call it?" Red looked at the wall above the door where the old sign hung crooked. "Call it what it should have always been called." "And what's that?" Tank asked. Red smiled, pointing to the spot where the new sign would go. Kindness served here. By sunset, the work had begun. Some men painted the walls with fresh white paint. Others built a wooden ramp at the entrance so wheelchairs could get in easily. The waitress brought them cold lemonade and sandwiches. People driving by honked their horns or waved their hands. Word spread faster than wildfire. The Hells Angels bought Mabel's diner. Inside, Red stood by the counter. Tired but calm. He could almost hear Lily's laughter echoing in the room. Tank slapped him on the shoulder. "You happy now, boss?" Red smiled. "Not yet, but we're getting there." He looked around at the men working, the sound of hammers and laughter filling the air. "Tomorrow this place opens again, and nobody gets turned away." Tank raised his coffee cup. "To Lily." Red lifted his cup too. "To Lily and to anyone who's ever been told they didn't belong." The men cheered softly. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to shake the dust off the walls. Outside, the last light of day faded. Across the highway, the diner's new sign leaned against the wall, still wet with paint, waiting to be hung in the morning. And for the first time in a long time, Red felt peace settle in his chest like a warm blanket. By sunrise, that peace had turned into purpose. The small town woke to a sound it hadn't heard in years. The deep thunder of motorcycle engines rolling together, steady and strong. 87 bikes came down Main Street, chrome shining in the golden light. Windows shook, coffee cups rattled, and every head turned to look. Old men stepped out of the barber shop. Mothers pulled their kids to the sidewalk to watch. Shop doors opened, curtains shifted, and for a moment the town went completely still. At the front of the line rode Red. Behind him came Tank, Bobby, and dozens of others riding shoulder to shoulder. Their black leather jackets shined in the morning sun, the Hells Angels patch glowing like a symbol of something new. Not rebellion this time, but redemption. They weren't there to cause trouble. They were there to make things right. When they reached Mabel's diner, the engines shut off one by one, until the only sound left was the soft ticking of cooling metal. The whole street went silent. The man in the suit stood behind the glass, frozen in place. The waitress pressed both hands to her mouth, eyes wide with surprise. Red stepped off his bike, boots crunching against the gravel. He looked up at the building. The old sign was gone, replaced with a fresh one painted the night before. Kindness served here. The words shined in sunlight like they belonged there all along. Red pushed open the door. The bell rang softly. Inside, the diner looked brand new. White walls, polished counters, clean tables. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air again, warm and sweet. The waitress turned toward him, her voice shaking. "It's ready," Red nodded. "Then let's open it." He stepped back outside, faced the growing crowd, and said clearly, "Breakfast is on us. Everyone eats." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Another joined in. Within seconds, the whole street burst into cheers. People poured in, laughing, shaking hands, taking seats at every table. Tank leaned against his bike, smiling wide. "You did it, boss." Red shook his head. "No, we did." Inside, the cook, the same man who once turned Lily away, stood behind the grill. His face was red, his eyes looking down. He said nothing, just kept flipping pancakes on the hot surface. Red walked over to him slowly. "Glad to see you working," he said quietly. The man paused for a moment. "I didn't understand before." Red nodded. "You do now. That's what matters." He poured himself a cup of hot coffee and sat at the same booth where Lily had once been sitting. The waitress placed a plate of pancakes in front of him. Golden brown, butter melting slowly, strawberries cut like little hearts. He smiled. "Looks familiar." "I thought it was only right," she said softly. He took a bite and for a moment everything stopped. The noise, the crowd, the memories, all faded away. It was just him, that booth, and the feeling that the world had found a small way to heal itself. Outside, people lined the street taking pictures with their phones, waving at the bikers. Kids ran up and down the sidewalk pretending their bicycles were motorcycles. An old woman in a floral dress walked over to Red's table carefully. "Are you the man who bought this place?" "Yes, ma'am," she smiled warmly. "My husband and I came here every Sunday before he passed away. It's good to see it alive again." Red nodded slowly. "That's what it's meant to be." She patted his hand gently. "You did a good thing." He smiled back. "No, ma'am, we all did." Tank came in, grinning from ear to ear. "You should see outside. Half the town's waiting to eat." "Then don't keep them waiting," Red said. Tank laughed. "You know, we should hang that little girl's drawing where everyone can see it." Red pointed to the wall behind the counter. "Already did." There it was, framed and shining under the morning light. A crayon drawing of a diner, motorcycles parked outside, and a rainbow with the words, "Thank you for letting me eat." Tank looked at it for a long time, his rough face softening with emotion. She changed a lot more than she'll ever know. "Yeah," Red said quietly. "She reminded a whole town how to care about each other." By noon, every seat was taken. The laughter spilled out onto the street like music. The local news van arrived, cameras rolling to capture the moment. A young reporter walked up to Red with a microphone. "Sir, why did you do this?" He looked around the room at the smiling faces, the sound of forks on plates, the warmth filling every corner. He said simply, "Because nobody should ever feel too poor to eat." The reporter smiled brightly. "That's beautiful." "It's just true," Red said calmly. "The world gets loud, but kindness doesn't need a microphone." Outside, people kept coming in waves. Farmers, teachers, truckers. Some brought donations in envelopes, others brought groceries in bags, and some just came to say thank you with tears in their eyes. Then Red noticed them across the street. Lily and her mom. They were watching quietly from the sidewalk, the little girl waving shyly with her small hand. Red raised his hand high and waved back with a smile. The mom smiled too, tears rolling down her eyes. Tank saw them, too. "Think they know what they started?" Red nodded slowly. They do. You can see it in their faces. The engines shined in the afternoon sun. The smell of pancakes hung in the air. The new sign, "Kindness served here," moved gently in the breeze. Red leaned against his bike, taking it all in. Tank joined him, standing close. Think people will remember this? Red smiled slightly. They will, because this isn't just breakfast. It's a second chance. The two men stood quietly side by side as the light began to fade. And for the first time since Lily whispered those 4 words, Red felt that they finally meant something new. They won't let me eat. Not anymore. The town had changed overnight, and everyone could feel it in the air. The next morning, sunlight poured through the diner windows like a quiet blessing. The smell of bacon and coffee drifted across Main Street, making people's mouths water. People were already lined up before the doors even opened. The neon sign hummed softly, "Kindness served here." Inside, Red sat at the counter, sipping his hot coffee slowly. Tank stood near the door, keeping watch, though not because of trouble. More like pride. Bobby was fixing the old jukebox, humming a tune under his breath. The diner didn't feel like a business anymore. It felt like home, warm and welcoming. The waitress wiped the counter with a clean towel and said, smiling, "Haven't seen this place this full in years." Red nodded. "Feels right, doesn't it?" She nodded back. "It does." But outside, someone was watching closely. Someone who didn't like what he saw. The man in the suit. He stood across the street, arms crossed tight, eyes full of anger and hurt. The same man who once told a hungry mother and child to leave his diner now saw his name gone from the sign, his power gone with it. The sound of laughter from inside seemed to burn his pride like fire. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He crossed the street with heavy steps and pushed open the door hard. The bell above it rang sharp and loud. The diner went quiet instantly. The waitress froze in place. Tank straightened up, alert. Bobby turned off the jukebox. Red looked over his shoulder but didn't move from his seat. The man walked straight to him with purpose. "You think you can just take over my place like this?" Red turned slowly, setting his coffee cup down gently. "Morning." "Don't morning me," the man snapped angrily. "You embarrassed me. You made a fool out of me in front of the whole town." Red stayed calm and steady. "No, you did that yourself." The man's face turned red with anger. "You had no right to buy my business. No right to make a circus out of it." Red stood up quietly. He wasn't angry. He didn't need to be. His presence alone filled the space around him. "We didn't buy it to embarrass you," he said. "We bought it to fix what you broke." The man laughed bitterly, a harsh sound. "Fix what I broke? You think flipping pancakes for freeloaders fixes anything? You think giving people free meals teaches them anything?" Red's voice stayed low and even. "Yeah, it teaches them that decency still exists in this world." The man stepped closer, lowering his voice, but not his pride. "You're nothing but a bunch of thugs trying to look holy. You're not saviors. You're criminals on motorcycles." Tank shifted his weight, ready to step forward and defend Red. But Red raised a hand calmly, stopping him. His tone stayed calm and steady. "We're not trying to be saviors. We're just people who got tired of watching others get turned away." The man's voice shook with anger now. "You think you can make me look like the bad guy?" Red met his eyes directly. "I don't have to. You did that all on your own." The room stayed silent and still. Every person inside was watching now. The waitress, the old man at the booth, even the kids eating pancakes stopped to listen. Red took a slow, deep breath. "You told a child she couldn't eat because her mom's card didn't work. You called it business, but kindness is good business too. It just doesn't pay the same kind of bills." The man opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time, he didn't seem angry anymore. He seemed small and defeated. Red continued, his tone softer now. "Look around you carefully. This place was dying before yesterday. You stopped feeding people, and the soul of this town starved with it. Now look at it." The man glanced around slowly. Every booth was full of people. Laughter bounced off the walls like music. The smell of breakfast filled the air like something holy and pure. "This," Red said quietly, "is what a diner's supposed to be." The man swallowed hard, his throat tight. His anger had nowhere left to go now. "So what happens now?" he muttered quietly. Red shrugged his shoulders. You move on with your life. We'll keep this place open to anyone who walks in. Nobody turned away ever again. The man looked down at his shoes. And if I say you'll ruin it? Red smiled slightly. Then you'll just have to watch us prove you wrong. For a moment, it seemed like the man might explode with anger again, but then something strange happened. His shoulders sank down. The fight drained from his face completely. His pride melted into something quieter and softer. He glanced toward the framed drawing on the wall behind the counter. "Who made that?" he asked, pointing at it. Red followed his gaze. "A little girl named Lily, the one you turned away." The man looked down at the floor, unable to meet Red's eyes. "She drew that?" "She did," Red said. "She's the reason all this happened." The man nodded slowly, almost to himself, processing it all. "I didn't mean to hurt her. His voice broke a little. "I just thought I was doing what my father would have done." Red's face softened with understanding. "Your father ran this place with heart. He fed people who couldn't pay. You know that, don't you?" The man blinked in surprise. "He did?" "Yeah," Red said. "Ask around. Half this town remembers your old man giving out free pie to anyone who looked like they'd had a rough day." The man looked up at him, guilt heavy in his eyes. "Guess I forgot what kind of man he was." Red nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time you remember." The man took a shaky breath. "You really plan to keep this going?" "As long as the lights stay on," Red said firmly. The man nodded again, silent for a long moment. Then he did something no one expected. He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded check, and slid it across the counter slowly. Red frowned, confused. "What's this?" "A donation," the man said quietly, "for Lily's diner." Red looked at him carefully. "You sure about that?" The man managed a weak smile. "Yeah, it's about time I did something right." Red picked up the check and folded it neatly into his jacket pocket. "You just did." The man looked around one last time, then turned to leave. When he reached the door, he stopped and said softly, "You know, my dad used to say the same thing you just told me." Red raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" The man smiled faintly. "Kindness is good business." Then he stepped outside into the morning light. For a while, nobody said anything. The whole diner felt lighter, like something ugly had been lifted out of it. The waitress wiped her eyes with her apron. "Well," she said, with a shaky laugh, "guess miracles do happen." Red smiled warmly. "Sometimes they just wear leather." Everyone laughed. Not loud, but honest and real. The sound filled the air like sunlight pouring through windows. Tank clapped Red on the back hard. "You handled that well." Red shrugged his shoulders. "You don't fight pride with fists. You fight it with truth." He turned toward the window. Across the street, the man in the suit was standing still for a moment, watching the bikes shine in the sun. Then slowly he smiled, small, unsure, but real, and walked away down the street. Red looked back at the crowd inside. "All right," he said, picking up his coffee again. "Let's get back to work." The waitress grinned wide. "What's next?" Red looked around at the full tables, the smell of pancakes in the air, the sound of laughter bouncing off the walls. "We keep doing what we came here to do," he said. "Serve kindness, one plate at a time." Tank nodded firmly. "I'll drink to that." Red raised his cup high. "So will I." They clinked their mugs together and drank, the sunlight spilling across the counter, the framed drawing glowing behind them, a child's picture that had become a town's redemption story. And for the first time, everyone understood what Red had been saying all along. You don't have to be rich to make people feel full. You just have to care enough to start. Those words stayed in everyone's mind that week. By Saturday, kindness served here wasn't just a diner anymore. It had become a heartbeat pulsing through the town. People came from nearby towns just to see it with their own eyes. Families who hadn't eaten out in months sat together again, smiling. Kids pressed their faces to the glass windows, pointing at the rows of bikes parked proudly out front. And every customer noticed the same thing. The framed crayon drawing above the counter, simple and powerful. The words written in a child's hand, "Thank you for letting me eat." That morning, the diner was busier than ever before. Even the mayor showed up. Gray suit, polished shoes, nervous smile. Cameras flashed, news crews whispered to each other. Red wasn't one for attention, but he let them come anyway. The story wasn't about him. Tank leaned near the window, smirking. Never thought we'd see the mayor in a biker diner. Red chuckled. Guess we're full of surprises. The mayor shook Red's hand firmly. Mr. Red, on behalf of Oak Ridge, thank you. You turned a place that divided people into one that brings them together. Red nodded politely. Appreciate that, sir. The mayor went on speaking. The grocery store started a take what you need shelf. The church opened a food drive. Seems kindness is catching on like wildfire. Red smiled. Good. The world could use more of it. Then the diner door opened and everything went quiet instantly. Lily and her mother stood there in the doorway. The girl's blue ribbon shimmered in the sunlight as her small hands gripped the wheels of her chair. Her mother held a paper bag, eyes shy but kind. For a second, no one moved or spoke. Then Red stood and smiled warmly. Well, look who it is. Lily grinned big. Hi, Mr. Biker. Hey, sweetheart, Red said. Glad you made it back. Her mother spoke softly. We just wanted to bring something. She handed him the bag carefully. Inside was a small plate of pancakes, a little burnt around the edges, uneven, but beautiful. I made them, Lily said proudly. They're not perfect, but I tried my best. Red's throat tightened with emotion. They look perfect to me. The crowd watched quietly, touched by the moment. The mother smiled, tears filling her eyes. We saw the news. The hospital started a fundraiser for Lily's treatments. People we've never met are helping us now. You didn't just feed us. You changed everything. The waitress wiped her eyes with a napkin. You deserve every bit of it. Red knelt down beside Lily's chair, getting to her level. You know, kid, you started all this. She blinked in surprise. Me? Yeah, you said 4 little words that made everyone remember what kindness looks like. She giggled softly. I guess I was really hungry. Laughter filled the diner, soft and warm like a blanket. The mayor cleared his throat to get attention. If I may, he said, turning toward the cameras. This young lady reminded us that even the smallest voice can wake up a whole town. He knelt down beside Lily, getting on her level. You've done more good than you'll ever know. So from now on, the first Saturday of every month will be Kindness Day, in your honor. The crowd gasped in surprise, then cheered loudly. Lily's eyes went wide with wonder. There's a day for me? The mayor smiled warmly. There's a day for what you started. Red leaned down close to her. Told you, kid, you changed something big. She beamed with pride. I did, didn't I? Her mom hugged her tight, crying quietly with joy. Cameras flashed bright, but no one paid them any mind. It wasn't about headlines or fame. It was about heart. When things calmed down a bit, Lily looked at Red again. Can I put something on the wall? He nodded without hesitation. Of course. She pulled a folded paper from her jacket carefully. Another drawing. It showed the diner again, but this time filled with people. Bikers, families, old folks, kids, all smiling and eating together. Over the roof, written in bright red crayon. If you're hungry, you're welcome. Red blinked back tears, trying not to cry. That's perfect. He called the waitress over quickly. Frame it. Hang it next to the first one. The waitress nodded, her voice cracking with emotion. Yes, sir. Lily's mom whispered softly. You turned this place into hope. Red shook his head gently. You two brought the hope. We just built around it. The mayor smiled proudly. You've created something here that will last long after any of us are gone. Red nodded slowly. That's all I ever wanted. As the day went on, the diner stayed full of people. The smell of bacon and coffee drifted into the street outside. Kids laughed on the sidewalk, playing games. The sound of motorcycles mixed with music from the jukebox inside. Red stepped outside for some fresh air. Tank joined him, handing over a cup of hot coffee. They looked through the window together. Inside, Lily and her mom were surrounded by people smiling and thanking them warmly. Tank said quietly, Hard to believe all this came from one little voice. Red smiled to himself. That's usually how the best things start. Tank nodded in agreement. You think people will remember this? Red looked toward the gold letters on the sign. Kindness served here, glowing in the afternoon sun like a promise. They will, he said softly. Because it's hard to forget the day a little girl taught a town how to care again. They stood together in silence, watching the light fade over Main Street. Inside, Lily's laughter floated through the open door, bright, pure, unafraid of anything. Red smiled to himself. You hear that? Tank tilted his head, listening. Yeah, that's what change sounds like, Red said, and for once, the road felt still, like it had finally led him home. By the next morning, news of what had happened at Kindness Served here had spread far beyond Oak Ridge. It wasn't just a local story anymore. It was everywhere people looked. The headline ran across the morning papers in bold letters. Hell's Angels, buy diner to feed hungry child. Kindness spreads across county. On television, they showed the same images over and over. Red standing beside Lily, her little drawing framed behind them on the wall. The words, "If you're hungry, you're welcome," glowing above the counter like a beacon. The phones at the diner didn't stop ringing all morning. Calls came from neighboring towns, from old veterans, single mothers, even teachers wanting to help out. Some people offered donations of money. Others just said simply, "Thank you for reminding us who we used to be." The waitress, still wiping tables between answering calls, looked at Red with wide eyes. "You know this is national news now, right?" Red smiled calmly. "Good. Maybe it'll make somebody somewhere think twice before turning someone away." Tank laughed from behind the counter. "You just made kindness famous." Red shrugged his shoulders. It's about time it got some good press. That afternoon, a news crew showed up to film a follow-up story. The reporter, the same young woman from before, smiled as she stepped inside the diner. "Red," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "The story has over 1 million views online. People are calling this place a miracle." Red laughed softly. "Miracle is a big word for a stack of pancakes." She smiled back at him. "It's more than that. People see hope in what you did here." Red looked around the room carefully. The chatter of voices, the warmth in the air, the smell of butter and coffee everywhere. Hope's been sitting at these tables all along. It just needed a reason to come back. The camera rolled as she asked another question. "What made you buy this diner instead of just giving money?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Because money fades away. But places like this, they teach people how to treat each other with respect. You feed one person, you help a belly. You feed a town, you heal a heart." The reporter nodded, her eyes glassy with tears. "That's beautiful." He gave a small smile. "It's just true." Later that day, as the sun dropped low in the sky, a group of kids came by on bikes. They were maybe 10 or 11 years old, their faces full of curiosity and wonder. One of them pointed to the row of motorcycles parked outside and asked loudly, "Are you guys the bad bikers or the good ones?" Tank laughed so hard, he nearly spilled his coffee everywhere. "Guess it depends who you ask." Red crouched down to the boy's level, looking him in the eye. "We used to be the kind that scared people away. Now we try to be the kind that helps them." The boy grinned wide. "So you're heroes?" Red shook his head slowly. "No, son, just men who finally figured out what really matters in life." The boy nodded thoughtfully, taking it in. "I want to be like that when I grow up." Red smiled warmly. "Then you already are." The kids waved goodbye and rode off, their laughter echoing down Main Street like music. Tank watched them go with a smile. "You see that? That's the new rumor about us. Used to be people locked their doors when they saw our jackets. Now kids wave at us." Red looked proud. "That's the kind of reputation I can live with." By the end of the week, the diner had raised enough donations to cover Lily's next 2 surgeries completely. The town council even voted to add wheelchair ramps to every public building in Oak Ridge. The mayor called a small meeting that night. Standing in front of the crowd, he said clearly, "This all started because one little girl was denied a meal. And now, look around us. Our businesses are helping families again. Neighbors are checking in on each other, and we finally remember what community means. We can't change the whole world, but we changed ours." The crowd clapped loudly with joy. Red stood in the back, arms crossed, quietly watching everything unfold. The man in the suit, the former owner, walked up afterward. He looked different now. No more expensive tie, no smug grin on his face, just humility and respect. He extended a hand. "To Red, I came to say thank you." Red paused for a moment, then shook his hand firmly. "For what? For not giving up on this place," the man said softly, "and for not giving up on me either." Red studied him for a moment. "You doing all right?" He nodded slowly. "Better. Been volunteering at the shelter downtown. Figured I'd start learning what my dad actually meant about feeding people." Red smiled faintly. Sounds like you're finally cooking up something good. The man laughed quietly. Guess I am. They shook hands again. No tension, no grudges left. Just quiet respect between them. The next morning, the diner opened to a familiar sight that warmed everyone's hearts. Lily and her mom sitting by the window. The little girl was coloring with crayons, her pancakes half-eaten, her laughter filling the air like sunshine. The waitress whispered to Red, "She looks happier every time she comes in here." "Good," Red said softly. "That's how it should be." Lily waved him over excitedly. "Mr. Biker, look at this." She showed him her new drawing proudly. This one showed a big red heart with wings sitting above the diner. "That's for everyone who helps people," she explained. Red smiled down at her. "I like that a lot. You've got a real talent, kid," she nodded confidently. "Mom says you gave us hope." Red shook his head gently. "No, sweetheart, you gave it to us." The mother smiled through tears of gratitude. "You'll never know what this means to us." Red glanced around the diner slowly. The laughter, the smell of coffee, the sun spilling across the floor in golden streams, and said, "Yeah, I think I do." Outside, the street was busier than ever before. People lined up for breakfast, not because they were hungry, but because they wanted to be part of something good and meaningful. A man in a suit and a mechanic sat side by side, talking like old friends who'd known each other for years. Teenagers held the door open for strangers with smiles. The world wasn't perfect, but for that little corner of it, kindness had become normal again. Tank came outside, wiping his hands on a towel. "You see all this happening?" Red nodded. "I do." Tank grinned wide. "So, what's next for us, boss?" Red smiled calmly. "Same as yesterday. Keep the doors open. Keep the coffee hot. Keep the kindness coming every single day." Tank laughed. "You're starting to sound like a preacher now." Red chuckled. "If I am, it's because the sermon's short, and it's served with syrup." They both laughed together. The sound of engines echoed in the distance as more riders approached the diner. Some were angels, others from different clubs, men and women who'd heard the story and came to help out. They parked their bikes in neat rows, walked inside, and started pouring coffee for customers without being asked. No introductions needed. They already understood what the place stood for. That night, as the diner lights dimmed and the last cups were washed clean, Red stepped outside into the cool air. The air was cool and fresh, the stars, clear and bright above. Across the parking lot, the neon sign still glowed warmly. Kindness served here. He stood there a while, listening to the hum of the highway and the faint laughter from inside the building. Tank joined him, lighting a cigarette slowly. "You think this will last?" Tank asked quietly. Red looked at the sign again thoughtfully. "If we keep showing up, it will." Tank nodded in agreement. "Guess that's all the world really needs. People who keep showing up every day." Red smiled quietly to himself. Exactly right. They stood there side by side, the hum of engines fading into the night air. And for once, it didn't feel like they were running from their past anymore. They were riding straight into something better, something built on pancakes, compassion, and a little girl's courage to speak up. Weeks passed by, but the feeling never faded away. The diner had become more than just a place to eat food. It had become a reminder that kindness wasn't a one-time story in the news. It was something people could live every single day. Every morning, the same sound filled the air, the clinking of dishes being stacked, the soft hiss of coffee being poured into cups, and the laughter that always seemed to start before sunrise even came. Locals called it the sound of home. Red usually arrived early, long before the doors opened to customers. He'd sit at the corner booth, the same one where Lily had first whispered her quiet heartbreak, and look out the window as Main Street came alive with people. He didn't say much to anyone, but people noticed the peace on his face clearly. For a man who'd spent most of his life riding through storms and trouble, he finally looked like he'd found steady ground beneath his feet. Tank came in one morning, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. "You're here early again," he said. Red smirked. "Someone's got to make sure the coffee is strong enough." Tank laughed, pouring himself a cup. "You ever think about how weird this is? Us running a diner?" Red shrugged his shoulders. "Weird's just another word for new and different." Tank nodded. "I'll drink to that." By mid-morning, families began to fill the tables with happy faces. You could always spot the newcomers easily. They were the ones who stood by the door for a moment, looking around in disbelief, like they couldn't believe something so simple could feel so good and welcoming. The waitress, now wearing a new uniform with kindness served here stitched on the sleeve, would greet them all the same way with a warm smile. If you're hungry, you're home. She'd point to the wall behind the counter, where two drawings hung side by side. Lily's first and second masterpieces displayed proudly. The colors had faded slightly over time, but their message still glowed brighter than any neon sign ever could. Red always paused to look at them before starting his day with a quiet moment. Somehow, those little pieces of paper had turned into a compass for the whole town to follow. One Saturday morning, Lily rolled through the door again, her mom right behind her, pushing gently. The bell above the door rang like an old friend calling out her name. "Morning, sweetheart," Red said warmly. "You're up early today." She grinned wide. "We're helping today." "Mom says we're volunteers now." Red smiled back. "Is that right?" Her mother nodded proudly. She wanted to take orders from customers. "Then she's the boss," Red said, pretending to salute her like a soldier. Lily laughed out loud. "Okay, first order." "Everyone has to smile right now." The whole room obeyed instantly, without question. She moved from table to table, her chair gliding across the smooth new floor, handing out napkins and greeting people like she owned the place. It didn't take long for everyone to start calling her Little Miss Pancake with affection. When the lunch rush slowed down, Red crouched beside her chair. "You're pretty good at this," he said. She beamed with pride. "I like it here. Nobody looks sad anymore." Red smiled softly. "That's the point exactly." Outside, the world kept changing too, in small but important ways. Other diners across the state started adopting the same rule. If you're hungry, you're welcome here. Some even painted it on their windows in big letters. Red began receiving letters from strangers far away. A single mom in Ohio, a trucker in Texas, a retired teacher in Florida, all saying the same thing. "You reminded us how to care about others." He kept every letter in a box under the counter carefully. "These," he'd say to Tank, "are worth more than any check or money." Tank would grin. "You sound like a poet now." Red shrugged. "Maybe kindness makes poets out of all of us eventually." As autumn rolled in slowly, the leaves turned gold and orange and the diner became even cozier and warmer. The windows fogged up in the mornings, the smell of cinnamon pancakes filling the air like perfume. On Fridays, the bikers still rolled through town, not as a spectacle anymore, but as family members. They'd help fix things around the diner, stock supplies on shelves, even play with the kids who came by after school. Nobody in town called them gang members anymore at all. They were the guys who bought breakfast for everyone. And every time they parked their bikes out front in neat rows, people honked their horns, waved their hands, or just smiled warmly. The same noise that once scared folks now made them feel safe and protected. One evening, after the last customer left and the neon sign flickered against the night sky outside, Red sat alone at the counter in silence. The place was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator running. He looked up at the drawings again on the wall. His eyes stayed on Lily's words. "If you're hungry, you're welcome." He thought about how far those words had traveled across the country, how a single act had rippled out like waves and changed so many lives for the better. Tank walked in, tossing his keys on the counter with a clatter. "You closing up for the night?" "Yeah," Red said, "just thinking about things." Tank poured himself a cup of coffee, even though it was probably his 5th cup that day. About what exactly? Red sighed softly. How fast everything can change when somebody decides to care about others. One little girl spoke up bravely. "And look at this place now." Tank nodded, looking around the diner carefully. "Funny thing about change, you never see it coming until it's standing right in front of you, smiling with syrup on her face." Red chuckled. That's one way to put it. They sat there in the soft glow of the neon sign outside. Two old bikers surrounded by memories that didn't hurt anymore like they used to. A few weeks later, Red got a letter with no return address on it. Inside was a single photo, a picture of Lily at the hospital smiling big, with her doctor holding up a sign that said, "Thank you for helping me heal." At the bottom, her mom had written in pen, "She's walking again, little by little every day." Red stared at the photo for a long time without moving. He didn't realize he was smiling until Tank looked up from fixing the jukebox across the room. "What's that in your hand?" Tank asked. "A miracle," Red said quietly with emotion. He pinned the photo next to her drawings on the wall. The three pieces, the first cry for help, the second message of welcome, and now the image of her standing again, told a story no words could capture fully. People who came in started noticing it right away. Some cried with joy, some just smiled warmly, but everyone left changed in some way. The diner never stopped being busy after that moment, but more importantly, it never stopped being honest and true. Some days were hard and challenging. Supplies ran low on shelves. Bills piled up on the desk, but the town always came together to help. A farmer dropped off fresh eggs. A teacher brought milk in containers. A mechanic fixed the stove for free without asking for payment. And every time, Red thought to himself quietly, this is what a real family looks like in action. One evening, Lily came in again, walking this time on her own feet, shaky and slow, but standing tall and proud. The bell rang as she pushed the door open with effort, her mom right beside her, tears streaming down her face. The whole diner froze in place. Then applause filled the air like thunder. Even Red stood up too fast, knocking his coffee over by accident. "Look at you," he said softly, walking toward her carefully. Lily grinned wide. "Told you I'd get better someday?" Red's voice broke just a little with emotion. "Yeah, sweetheart, you sure did. Keep your promise." She looked up at him, smiling proudly. "Can I take your order now?" Red laughed out loud. "You can take over the whole place if you want to." Everyone laughed together, clapping again with joy. The moment felt like a full circle closing, the kind of ending that doesn't really end at all. It just becomes something new and beautiful. As the night closed in, around them, Red stepped outside one last time into the cool air. The sky was full of stars shining bright, and the air smelled like coffee and rain mixed together. He watched the reflection of the diner lights on the wet street and whispered softly, "You did good, kid." Tank joined him outside, arms crossed over his chest. "Talking to yourself again?" Red smiled. "Talking to her, actually." Tank nodded in understanding. She earned it, without question. They stood there in the quiet together, two men who'd lived rough lives, but somehow found redemption in a little girl's hunger and a town's second chance to do better. Behind them, the diner lights glowed steady, and Lily's laughter carried through the open window. It was more than a sound. It was a promise, the kind that stays long after the noise fades. Soft, steady, alive. Months passed, but the kindness served here never lost its glow. The neon sign still buzzed gently every night, painting a warm pink color across the quiet street. It had become the heart of Oak Ridge, not because of what was served, but because of what it stood for. People still came from far away just to see it. Some stayed for coffee. Others stayed to remember what goodness feels like. The walls inside told the story without a single word. Lily's two drawings and her photo now hung together in a single frame. Beneath them, a small brass sign read, "One voice can feed 1,000 hearts." Red never asked for fame. He didn't care about the cameras or the praise. What mattered was seeing that booth, the one where Lily had once whispered, "They won't let me eat," always filled with laughter and food. He liked to sit in the corner now, quietly watching the world move through the diner, like a wave of second chances. Sometimes he'd see the same faces come back again and again. A mechanic, a schoolteacher, a farmer, a lonely widower who found family here. Each one walked in with something heavy and walked out a little lighter. That was enough. One evening, as the last customers left, Red stood behind the counter wiping down tables. Tank was locking the doors, humming some old country tune. "You realize," Tank said, "we've been here almost a year now." Red nodded. "Hard to believe." "Harder to believe we still haven't scared anyone off," Tank joked. Red laughed softly. "Guess we traded scaring people for welcoming them." Tank grinned. "That ought to go on a t-shirt." Red leaned on the counter. "I think about her sometimes. You know, that little girl. How it all started with 4 words. Tank nodded. "I think about her too. She changed us more than we changed her." Red smiled. "That's the thing about kindness. You think you're giving it away, but it sticks to you." Tank raised his coffee cup. To sticking with kindness. Red clinked his cup against his friends. To Lily, the one who showed us how. They drank quietly, the room glowing softly around them. Later that night, when Tank headed home, Red stepped outside alone. The streets were empty, the sky wide and silver. He could hear crickets, the hum of faraway traffic, and the faint buzz of the diner sign. He walked toward the edge of the parking lot where the grass met the road. The air smelled like rain and motor oil, the scent of a life he still loved. For a long time, he just stood there thinking. He thought about the road behind him, all the places he'd been, all the mistakes he'd made, all the nights he'd spent running from himself. He'd never imagined the end of that road would be here. A small diner, a little girl, and a story that changed everything. And yet somehow it all made sense. He looked back at the glowing sign, "Kindness served here," and smiled. It wasn't just a diner anymore. It was proof that people could still surprise him. He pulled out his old lighter, flicked it open, and lit a cigarette. The flame flickered softly against the wind. Funny, he said to himself, all those years trying to look tough. And it turns out the bravest thing I ever did was care. He took a slow drag, breathed out into the night air, and looked up at the stars. A few minutes later, a familiar sound rumbled in the distance. Engines. Not loud this time, just steady. One by one, a few bikes appeared down the road, their headlights glowing in the dark. They pulled into the lot, parking beside each other. Old friends, new faces, the same brotherhood, but softer now. Tank hopped off first. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Me neither," Red replied. The others joined in, standing quietly beside him. No words, no plans, just being there. The night air hummed with peace. One of the newer riders, a young man barely 30, asked softly, "Boss, you ever think about leaving? Going back on the road?" Red looked at him, then back at the diner. "No, the road brought me here for a reason. You can't chase peace forever. At some point, you've got to build it." The younger man nodded slowly. "Guess you built it pretty good." Red smiled. "Didn't do it alone." They stood there for a while, watching the sign glow against the dark sky. Then Red said, "You know, when I was younger, I thought strength meant never bending, never showing emotion, but real strength." He paused, looking at the diner. "Real strength is choosing to stay gentle in a hard world." Tank nodded quietly. "You should tell people that." Red smiled. "I just did." When the last of the riders left, Red stayed behind. The night was deep and still. The stars shimmered above the diner like tiny promises. Inside, everything was quiet. The chairs stacked, the counters clean, the pictures on the wall glowing faintly under the lights. He walked to Lily's booth, running his fingers along the edge of the table. Then he looked up at her photo, her small smile, her brave eyes, and whispered, "You did good, kid. You changed more than you'll ever know." He sat down in that same booth, sipping his last cup of coffee for the night. The mug was chipped, the coffee lukewarm, but somehow it tasted perfect. He leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. The next morning, the town woke to another ordinary day, but something about the air felt lighter, cleaner, like the world itself had taken a deep breath. Kids on bikes rode past the diner, waving at the sign. A farmer stopped by to drop off fresh eggs. The waitress opened the doors, turning the sign to open just as the sun broke over the hills. And there was Red, as always, sitting in his booth, coffee in hand, waiting for the first customer of the day. He didn't need thanks. He didn't need praise. All he needed was to see someone walk in and smile, because that meant the promise was still alive. That meant the world hadn't forgotten. Outside, the engines of a few late riders rumbled softly in the distance. The day was beginning again, like it always did, with coffee, laughter, and the quiet sound of kindness finding its way back home. Some stories end with noise, sirens, engines, applause, but this one ended with silence. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that heals, the kind that comes after something good has been done. As the sun rose higher and the town came to life, the camera of memory would stay on that one small image, the diner glowing at the edge of the road, Lily's drawings hanging proudly inside, And a man who once carried anger now carrying peace. And if you stood there long enough watching those bikes ride off down the highway, you'd feel it too. That rare, quiet certainty that goodness doesn't need an audience. It just needs someone to start it.